بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين وانفعنا بالقرآن وسر الحكيم اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا بما ينفعنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا وأصلح لنا شأننا كله لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم وبعد قال المؤلف الإمام حجة الإسلام al-Ghazali رحمه الله ونفعنا به وبكم ثم الذي يخاف منه الضرر في أمر الدين قسمان. So if you remember back before Ramadan, we were just going through the text. We're on the section of the four major obstacles that will come across a person's path in his struggle to purify himself and to purify his ibadah. So if you remember, Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah, he began by talking about the very purpose of the human being is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he proved this from two ayahs of Quran which mention both these things. And then he said, well, if we know that that's our highest purpose is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to know Him, then how does one go about obtaining that level of worship or perfecting one's worship? And so he said he divided that into several different stages, through his own studies, his own training, his own experience throughout his life, because this book was written towards the end of his life. So it's a culmination of all of his experience and all of his wisdom and knowledge. And then, as you know, then the first stage was the stage of acquiring knowledge. Because if you don't know what you need to do, then you'll never be able to do it, And then the second stage was tawbah, making repentance from doing major sins or disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we were going through the third stage, which was the stage of four obstacles. The four obstacles of the nafs, the shaitan, the dunya, and the what was the other one? The fourth one, anyone? The world, yeah. Attachment to the world, the love of this world. Yeah, so we were in the final stage of those, which was talking about I think it was the one about the nafs, wasn't it? Yeah. But then he went into a discussion about taqwa and what is the meaning of taqwa. So we covered, and I think we started summarizing that last time, as we were short of time. So did we actually finish that chapter though? Or did we? Oh, so we finished that, yeah. Summarized it, yeah. Okay. So today we can go into the next section, which is, So this is also then carrying on from the idea of taqwa. So it says, taqwa al-a'da al-khamsa. What is the taqwa of our five limbs? And by limbs here, he means, limbs is probably not a good translation, but, it means five parts of us, of the human being, which is the eye, the tongue, the ear, the hand, and so on. So each of these limbs must have a portion of taqwa. And obviously we mentioned how taqwa is difficult to translate. And Imam al-Ghazali in his discussion, he already mentioned 3 different meanings of taqwa, at least from the Quran. Yeah? So we won't need to go into all of that again, but we can just use the term taqwa itself. But it means God-fearingness, God-consciousness, a sense of piety, a sense of being aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His commandments and His, you know. So he begins by saying the first section will be on the eye. The eye. عليك وفقك الله وإيانا لطاعته بحفظ العين. So first of all, Imam Ghazali rahimahullah says, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you and ourselves tawfiq, beware of and guard your eyes, your sight. فإنها سبب كل فتنة وآفة. So the eye is the cause, the source of all tribulations and disasters. وأذكر في أمرها ثلاثة أصول كافية. He says, I will simply mention 3 principles with regard to the eye that will be sufficient for this discussion. أحدها ما قال سبحانه أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قل للمؤمنين يغضوا من أبصارهم ويحفظوا فروجهم ذلك أزكى لهم إن الله خبير بما يصنعون. Say to the believers to lower their gaze, lower their gazes, and to protect their chastity or to protect their private parts. That is more that is more pure for them, and surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what you do. Yeah. So this is like the central ayah from the Quran to do with lowering the gaze. It's very clear. There's no really any sort of different interpretations here. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. They have to lower their gaze. Now what's the meaning of that? Yeah? What's the meaning of lower the gaze? وَعْلَمْ أَنِّي تَعَمَّلْتُ هَذِهِ الْآيَةَ فَوَجَدْتُ فِيهَا مَعَ قَصْرِهَا ثَلَاثَةَ مَعَانٍ عَزِيزَةٍ تَأْدِيبٌ وَتَنْبِيهٌ وَتَهْدِيدٌ. So he says, know that I have reflected deeply upon this particular ayah of Quran. And I have found, despite its very succinct nature, that there are 3 huge meanings to draw out from this particular ayah. One which relates to ta'deeb, which is teaching etiquette, the teaching of how we should behave and our manners. Tanbih, also it contains a point of what we could say here, an information, a point of knowledge. What tahdeed, and it also contains a warning. Yeah, so this ayah, O you who believe, lower your gazes and protect your private parts. That is more pure for you. Surely Allah is aware of what you do. It contains these 3 aspects. فَأَمَّا التَّأْدِيبُ فَقَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. As for the teaching of, akhlaq and manners and etiquette, it's a saying of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tell the believing men to lower their gaze, lower their gazes. And this is one of the places in the Quran when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has addressed the believing women separately from the believing men. So later on in the next ayah, it also says, say to the believing women to lower their gazes. So specifically, which doesn't happen often within the Quran or the Hadith, because normally when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the believers, it includes men and women by default. But on this occasion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has specifically added, first of all, the believing men and then the believing women as well. So there's no doubt left amongst us that this is not only applies to men, but specifically applies to women as well. Yeah, this idea of lowering the gaze. Because some people may have come along and said, no, this is really applies to men. Women don't have that problems or issues, and it's men that are always, that tend to transgress limits in terms of their shahawat. So there's no doubt that this applies to both genders, because it's specifically addressed to the mu'minat as well in the next ayah, which he doesn't particularly mention here. يَغُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. They should lower their gazes. So this means to lower the gaze from what is haram to look at. Meaning, if there are women that are haram for you to marry, if their aura is their aura, meaning their the parts of the body that should be covered is exposed, then it's haram to look at that. If it's a young woman, even the face, you shouldn't look at the face even though it's not part of the aura, it's not part of the thing that has to be covered. In the fiqh they specifically mention for younger women, many madhabs made it actually obligatory for them to cover their faces if they're young, especially if they're attractive. So all of that is forbidden. Now, people may often ask or may wonder, what's the situation concerning non-Muslim women? Christian or Jewish or atheist, whatever. Especially because we live in this place where we may often come across these people at work or elsewhere. What constitutes aura for them with respect to us? I have tried to look into this to some extent, as it's obviously a very live issue for myself as well as people here. I still have yet to find any specific references in the books of fiqh. I'm talking about the very extensive books of fiqh as well. I don't know if anyone else has come across anything. Jamil, have you ever come across anything specifically with that, in relation to that?
Non-Muslim women are looking at it.
Yeah. What is aura, first of all, for a non-Muslim? It's like, for example, hair. Is their hair considered to be aura? Because often, if you're at work, you're going to see a lot of, these women with their hair exposed and things like that. I've looked into several extensive fiqh works where they deal with lowering of the gaze, but they don't specifically mention that.
Do they distinguish between Muslim and non-Muslim when they talk about aura? I don't know if they do distinguish.
I think they do, yeah. Well, they're ambiguous, that's the point anyway, They don't... And the nature of fiqh is they should be very specific and very, not be ambiguous. They should be clear what they're dealing with. So, anyway, the point here is whether or not it's aura. There's another aspect here of that thing which leads to fitna. Yeah? And the ayah of Quran, La taqrabu az-zina. Don't come close to doing any type of haram, any type of zina. So a lot of the segregation that we have, as Muslims, we tend to segregate between men and women. This is to do with that idea, that we don't want to do things that may lead to something haram as well. Because zina is a major sin. It's a very big sin. To the point, if you're a married man or a woman, you will be killed. It's one of the biggest kaba'ir. It's not a joke. So, within the society you're in, if you're in an environment which is conducive to that, even encouraging for that, that's a big problem, for us as Muslims. So the way we tend to be is we tend to make things as much as possible not conducive to that, you know. So it's, avoiding that is one of the biggest sins, because it breaks up families. And one of the main principles of Sharia is to protect the family, you know, and ird as well, and family, and those type of nasab, lineages, things like that. So the family unit is like the core unit of society. If families are breaking down, yeah, definitely your society is going to be broken down, you know. So you build up from the family unit. That's why the Sharia is very strong on protecting that family unit. Now, men are allowed to have up to 4 wives. Once again, because we don't want haram, we don't want things to happen in a way that is haram or illegal. So there's children that are being born that don't know who their father is, or, you know, out of marriage. You know, so it's also all to protect that core structure of a family. So that's why adultery is punished very severely. You know, because you're destroying that core family unit. You know, if people have that, you know, they can't control that desire, then if you're a man, you can. You know, that's why you have that option to take another wife, rather than doing something which is going to destroy a family. You know. So zina is a very dangerous thing, which we got to be really careful about in this society, you know, because as we become it becomes normalized for us, work in workplaces and things like that, you know, colleges, to just be mixing freely, you know. Men and women, sometimes we may forget, and that's the thing that, you know, as they said, the last arrow, you know, when Shaitan has run out of all ways, the one thing he always has left, the last arrow he has, you know, is that nisa, you know, for men. That thing will always be a potential downfall. No matter how that person has advanced or purified himself or become strong in the deen, that will always be a potential that Shaitan can get him. Yeah. Nisa, because that's the strongest desire in the human being, as it says in the Quran. زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ. You know, for human beings, the greatest desire is towards for men towards women. And then after that, the Quran mentions the other things: al-Banin, wal-Qanatir, al-Muqantara, children. Then treasures, you know, wealth. So it's in order. It's in order of how strong those desires are. And the proof of that is because, you know, a person may give up all of his wealth just for a love of a particular woman. Or a person may give up all of his wealth if he's unable to have children for the sake of having a child. You know? So this is why, you know, in Islam we have this etiquette of a general type of segregation. You know? But I think it's important, personally. Obviously, it doesn't mean that they can't be, you know, the men and women can speak to each other or interrelate in things that are needed, you know, if something is needed or necessary. For example, here we have a girls' school, you know, and we have female teachers, male teachers. To some point, they will have to relate to one another and talk about certain things, you know. But then it's important to be very careful there, not to go beyond what's needed. You know, we have to keep that in mind. We're not kuffar, you know. We don't have the same way of relating as them. I think some people have gone too far in this, you know. You know, some sheikhs have said, look, we're living in the West, and when you're in your workplace, you're sort of mixing around, you know. And then when we come into our religious places, we're having this very strict segregation, you know. And they're saying this is like a type of hypocrisy. Or they felt it's type of, like, you know, it's a bit strange, you know. So then they've gone and then mixed up the Muslims, if you see what I mean as well. Because they felt uncomfortable. Why are we doing this when we're non-Muslims? When we're Muslim, we're suddenly saying brothers and sisters completely separate. So I think they felt that they were not being sincere to themselves in some way. But I think that was mistaken. Because just because you're in an environment at work, which is not an ideal environment, you see what I mean? That's the way we need to look at it. That yes, I'm in that environment, but it's not ideal. It's not Islamic. I'm doing that as a type of darura. It's a type of way that something I can't avoid. But ideally, I would like to be in a more Islamic environment. And I always encourage people as well, if you find yourselves in workplaces that are less than ideal for your iman, not conducive to your iman, the environment, then make plans, try to find ways in future that you can get into more better environments. Make your career pathway such, which people often can do as well. And then obviously the rest is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as long as you try. Often for Muslims, having your own businesses is quite good. Or get into certain types of jobs where you can feel that your iman is not being damaged. It could even be within the same company, but you find a different role. Where you have your own office most of the time, or something like that. That's right.
Like become the chief executive officer.
Yeah, that as well. Get yourself to a position where you sort of control the environment. You're able to control the environment, and so on. So, I think just because we're in a less than ideal situation in certain situations, doesn't mean then we should make our Muslim institutions also say, no, in our Muslim institutions, let's try to keep that, what the Deen has prescribed, as much as possible.
Is there, because Muslims who don't agree with segregation, they often say that, look, what's the evidence? Is there any really strong Quran or Hadith that says that men and women should be segregated and separated?
I think so. I think it's like an accumulation of lots of different evidence. There's a lot of stuff. This is one of them. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. What does that mean? If it doesn't mean lowering your gaze from the opposite gender, then what does it mean? Because all commentators agree that this is the meaning of these ayahs.
But it's just that there's not really any that think that men and women should be separate and should be, that kind of very clear indication. Obviously, a lot of you can see that there's many things that happen that demonstrate that in the mosque, there's hadith that the women are at the back and the men are at the front. So the people who don't want to do that, they usually say that there's no strong proof. And are we saying that the proof of it is inferred from other evidences which demonstrate it?
Yeah.
But is that enough to make it a binding obligation of some people?
The thing is, I think why it is a sort of a grey area is because obviously there are times where men and women are allowed to. When you're buying and selling, women are going into the marketplaces, even like I mentioned in the workplace here. So there's not going to be that clear, strict boundaries, are there? You see what I mean? With the Prophet ﷺ, you can see there was a general segregation in the masjid. In other places, there was definitely. The wives of the Prophet ﷺ were behind, curtains and things like that. But at the same time, there was also, where there was required, there was women would come to the Prophet ﷺ, would speak to him. There was, some female Sahaba that were in battle as well, like Nusayba, radiallahu anha. She was famous for being in the Battle of Uhud as a fighter. She was one of those that was fighting and protecting the Prophet ﷺ at the time when a lot of the Muslims had actually left him, exposed. So it isn't one of those issues. But for those who say that you can completely just mix, it's clearly not right, not correct. And I think those ayahs like La taqrabu azina is quite clear. What's the meaning of that? Read the commentaries, the tafsir. We can't make the deen from ourselves. You see what I mean? The deen comes from a transmission. It comes from Sahaba to the generation after them to the generation after them. And the third generation are the fuqaha, Imam Malik, Abu Hanifa, So what is in the books of fiqh? That's what we have to go back to. You know, it's not a case of us just making up the deen from ourselves. You see what I mean? To know how the Quran was understood by the Prophet and by the Sahaba, we have to go back to those texts that have recorded that, you know. And there I think you can clearly see that there's definitely a segregation between men and women, but perhaps not as strict as later on developed as well. You know? If you look at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was less strict than what then became normal in society after that, as those societies became very patriarchal in nature, you know, when Islam took over Persia and those other type of places where very patriarchal societies. And then obviously there was an influence from there as well. So, you know, this other extreme of women never being allowed to leave the houses, and some of the later fuqaha gave fatwa that women should not go to the masjids. That was possibly going a bit too far then, you know. As the Prophet ﷺ had specifically said, do not forbid your women from going to the masjids. And there's a famous story of Sayyidina Umar, you know, one of his wives was asked by some of the other Sahaba. They said to her, you know, how come we see you coming to the masjid? And we all know about Sayyidina Umar's jealousy towards his women. You know, but we see you how come we can't see you coming out? How come he doesn't stop you, in other words? And she said that the words of the Prophet ﷺ are stopping him from stopping me from coming to the masjid. You know, the words of the Prophet ﷺ that don't prevent your women from going to the masjid. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I mean, actually this was one of the things when I was studying in Liverpool with Sheikh Siraj. It was, you know, one of my teachers, very sort of more elderly and quite very knowledgeable man. Because there were some Muslim brothers that I knew there that were practicing brothers and everything. And then once I was in one of their house, and they were sort of having this thing, you know, that the brother sit with his wife and sit with other brothers, or, you know, just mixing and just sort of talking and chatting and socializing like that, in that sense, between men and women that were practicing, but just, you know, they weren't really, they would sit together and just socialize, not for necessary things. So I actually asked Sheikh Siraj about that, you know. I said to him, this is what's happening. What do you say about that? And he just said to me, you know, I think he said to me, are they Muslims? Are you sure they're Muslims? Or are you sure they're Multazimin, like practicing, you know? And that was all he said, actually. He didn't really go further than that, you know? Or I can't remember if he did say anything after that, but, you know, so that's the thing. I mean, it's part of our deen, there's no doubt about it. There's no black and white, you know, you're not going to... The thing that is black and white is, you know, is forbidden to have khalwa, obviously, you know, be in seclusion with a woman that is non-mahram. And that's somewhere, obviously, we should definitely draw the line, you know. To go into a situation of khalwa, meaning in a seclusion with a woman that is not related to you. That is definitely forbidden in the clear hadith. And that's clear, you know, because that's obviously shaitan is going to be there in that situation, you know. Okay, but if you read the books of people like Imam al-Ghazali and those before him, it's very clear, you know, there is a segregation. There is an idea that Muslims, men and women, need to just preserve their dignity, their chastity, you know, deal with one another with a certain type of etiquette and adab. Yeah? Recently, one of the brothers was telling me he works in one of these big corporations and he's a Muslim. And he said the Muslims within the company, they've set up like a internet type of chat room for themselves just to, you know, speak to one another. So the brothers set up a separate one, the sisters a separate one. And he says there was like an uproar from the sisters saying, why can't we go to the brothers one? These are issues, they are life issues. I think and this is another very interesting area now of internet communication. Socializing through the internet. There's a whole new thing that needs to be looked at as well, which I have spent some time thinking about, especially about the seeing of images as well. So now you'll have computer-generated images of women and men, that are not real men or women, but they're just computer-generated. But they're also, they're obviously quite realistic. So do we say that's haram to look at as well? Does that come under the category of يَغُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ, lower their gaze? Because that's obviously not aura. It's obviously not. It's not a real person. It's just an image. But here, my personal opinion here is, well, obviously it needs to be worked through as a proper fatwa, but that this would potentially be either makruh or makruh tahrimi, meaning forbidden, because it can lead to, once again, zina. It can lead to people thinking about thoughts that they don't need to think about, and igniting these desires. And actually, Imam al-Ghazali will talk about that a bit later on. That one of the dangers of the site is it starts off processes, thought processes. It may ignite certain desires, and it will lead you towards doing things which are haram. So if that's the case, then that thing has to be cut off, from the source. So it's not going to be one of those things we're going to say is haram, but it's one of those things that for some people may be tahrimi, tahrim attached to it. Or if the fuqaha or the mufti, they feel that this is going to become a general harm, and they may make it tahrimi for everyone. So that's the sort of things we have to think about. So anyway, so he says, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِ يَغُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ, tell the believing men to lower their gazes. And as I mentioned the other ayah, tell the believing women to lower their gazes as well. So lowering the gaze, it means we're sort of having this, you're putting a hijab between you and that person. Yeah? Because it's not a physical hijab, but it is a hijab because you're lowering the gaze. It's the same effect as putting a hijab. So the believing men and believing women should both practice this. And if that's not the meaning of the ayah, then the challenge to people, bring what is the meaning of this ayah. Go and look in the tafsirs. This is always how these ayahs have been understood. You can't just make up your own thing, وَلَا بُدَّ لِلْعَبْدِ مِنْ امْتِثَالِ أَمْرِ السَّيِّدِ وَالتَّأْدِيبِ بِأَدَبِهِ وَالتَّعَدُّبِ. So Imam al-Ghazali says, the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to obey the command of his Lord and to follow the etiquette that he is teaching him. وَإِلَّا فَيَكُونْ سَيِّئَ الْأَدَبِ. If you don't do this, then you will become someone who has got سَيِّئَ الْأَدَبِ, a person of bad adab, a person of bad character, bad behavior. If you're going around staring at, all those things that you shouldn't be staring at, you're going to be, that's a sign of a bad character. فَيُحْجَبْ فَلَا يُؤْذَنْ لَهُ فِي حَضُورِ الْمَجْلِسِ. If you don't follow the etiquette, the adab that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us, you will be veiled. You will not be permitted to enter the presence of the king. If you disobey the king or do not follow the adab that the king is teaching you, then how can you enter into the presence and the majlis of the king? فَافْهَمْ هَذِي نُكْتَةً. So understand this nukta. وَتَأَمَّلْ مَا تَحْتَهَا. And think deeply about what it entails and what it leads to. فَإِنَّ فِيهَا مَا فِيهَا. It says, in it is what is in it. Okay? In it is what is in it. So the whole thing about, these gays, I think I mentioned this before once as well. This is all to do with those people who want to really go to the next level. You know, you're never gonna, this is not something you're gonna enforce upon all Muslims. You know, that they shouldn't be looking at this or looking at that. This is something for ourselves, our personal development, our personal spiritual progress. You know, if we as individuals want to go to that next level and want to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is that type of etiquette that is required, you know, to start lowering the gaze. Because it's protecting the heart, it's protecting our inwards, you know. It's protecting us from even, you could even say at the least, distractions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even if it's not something haram, it's something that may be distracting us from what our purpose is or should be, which is to be striving to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we're looking here and there, you know, like it mentioned in the Quran, مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرُ, about the Prophet ﷺ when he was on the Mi'raj, مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرُ, his gaze did not stray. Even though he was shown all the creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the 7 heavens, all of these wonderful things, heaven and hell, and all of these things, مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرُ, his eye did not deviate from his objective, which was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَمَّا التَّنْبِيهِ فَقَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَكُمْ. As for the second thing, which was a point of knowledge or information, ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَكُمْ, this is more pure for you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, after saying lower your gaze and guard your private parts. So you can see there the lowering of the gaze is linked to guarding of the private parts as well, as you've seen the tafsir if you read Qurtubi. Very good tafsir for people who want to find out what are the legal implications of Quran, the fiqh implications of Quran. Tafsir al-Qurtubi is one of the best tafsir of that nature. You see that he mentions that the lowering of the gaze is linked to يَحْفَظُ, as in the ayah as well. Lower your gazes and protect your private parts. It's not for no reason that these have come together here in this ayah. Yeah? So it's linked to لَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. This is all to do with protecting our private parts. وَيُنْتَلَقَ عَلَى مَعْنَيَيْنِ. So this is more pure for you, he says. Imam al-Ghazali says this is 2 meanings of purity here. أَزْكَى لَكُمْ. وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ. أَحَدُهُمَا إِنَّ ذَلِكَ أَطْهَرْ لِقُلُوبِهِمْ. The first meaning here is that this is more pure for their hearts. وَالزَّكَاةُ الطَّهَارَةُ, because zakat here means purity. So when we give zakat, we purify our wealth. وَالتَّزْكِيَةُ التَّطْهِيرُ. Tazkiyah is purification. وَالثَّانِي ذَلِكَ أَنْمَى لِخَيْرِهِمْ وَأَكْثَرُ. وَالزَّكَاةُ فِي الْأَصْلِ النَّمُو. The other meaning here is also, from the root meaning of zakat, is not only purity but also growth. So this is more conducive for them to grow. Yeah? For them to grow. In other words, in goodness, in reward, in closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to grow. فنبه على أن في غض البصر تطهير القلب وتكثير الطاعة والخير. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has informed us here that in lowering the gaze there is a purification of the heart and a growth in obedience and closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? وذلك أنك إن لم تغض بصرك وأرخيت عينانه تنظر إلى ما لا يعنيك فلا شيء يخلو من أن تقع عينك على حرام فإن تعمدت فذنب وكبيرة. So he says, you know, because if you were just to let your gaze wander wherever it wants to, and you release the reins completely, you will be looking at things in the least things which don't concern you. Remember the Prophet ﷺ said, "Min husn Islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'nihi." From the excellence of someone's Islam is to leave that which does not concern them. From the excellence, the husn of his Islam. Once again indicating that this is for those who want to strive to the next level. Yeah? Those who want to strive up to the next level. Leave things which don't concern you. Because now you've decided you want to devote yourself to coming closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You want to purify yourself. You want to become a true worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As close as you can come to the worship of the Prophet ﷺ. So the first stage, one of the stages of that is to leave that which does not concern you. Because if we carry on being concerned with things that don't concern us, we'll be wasting a lot of time being distracted with all sorts of different things, and we won't be able to give the time to what we really want to do and what we want to achieve. Yeah, so the eye is one of those things, and especially in the age we live in, this is so profound for the age we live in, because we are in such a visual culture, you know, very different to times past. You know, time of Imam al-Ghazali, people was like, what was there to see anyway? You know, women wearing hijab. There were no posters or televisions or films. You know, you go out, you'd be looking at the beautiful creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, so they lived in very different times as well. I mean, this is something that's so profound for us in our time, because we're surrounded by that visual bombardment, you know, of our senses. And people have written about, you know, the visual culture, how television especially has just transformed people's lives and our ways of thinking as well. This guy Neil Postman, he wrote quite some stuff about this. He was a professor from America. He has a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death and some other books. And he wrote about how visual culture is completely transforming the way people think, which in ways we don't realize. You know, before people used to read, you know, and he talks about before there was even radio or any type of like mass, you know, these instant communication. People used to read. That was, you know, how they got things, or they had the oral traditions. So for example, one of the things that happens is with the visual culture is in the past, he talks about America, and a president in America would be elected based on what he had to say. Because you'd have certain candidates, and America is such a vast country, people don't see who the person is, they would just know the name. And what would they know about him is what he had written, you know, in a books or in newspaper articles. That's what they would know of that person, you know, is what they had read of his writings. So when elections came about, people would elect, you know, those presidential candidates that they had been really convinced about their arguments. But since the coming of television, he says now it's much more about the appearance of the person. So a fat person could not become president of America today. It's impossible. It's a proven fact, you know, even in different, you know, this is why you see now the candidates, they're always people that are photogenic. You have to be photogenic. It's just a reality, you know, of the way things are now.
Except in India.
Is there a fat person then? Except there may be still some, you know, those traditional societies where but just, you know, just an indication of how we sometimes we don't realize how different our environment is to the past. You know, how visual we're always being bombarded. Even if you're walking down the road, you're always seeing posters, images, all sorts of things everywhere, you know. And now, like I was saying, with the internet as well, there are all sorts of images being generated by computers. And people need to think, and there needs to be fatwas, you know, on this. Because if it's corrupting people, you know, if it's leading people to do things that may lead to haram, then these things need to be, fatwas need to be given about this.
What about like, the cartoons they've got nowadays?
Cartoons?
3D cartoons.
What about them?
Children. It's good for them to watch.
I haven't seen any myself, 3D ones.
Not 3D, but you know what I mean.
Just cartoons and things like that.
They've got little flat style which we used to watch. Make ones.
I mean, there's certain, like you have these Disney films like computer generated ones. I personally am quite against them. I don't let my children watch any of them. Because I feel there's something very, very sinister about these computer generated worlds. Based on those hadith about, those people that try to imitate the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the day of judgment, those people will be in the depths of the hellfire. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say to them, bring life to the thing that you try to create. And that was obviously talking about those people who make artistic works or sculptures. That is something that is in very strong hadith about that. Sahih hadith, very strong, prohibitive of those things. And the reason why, because the illah is given in the hadith themselves, in some of the narrations, is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, give life to the thing you try to create. In other words, they are challenging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His attribute of being Khaliq and Bari and Musawwir. And don't forget, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Mutakabbir. The reason why we're not allowed to have arrogance is because that is one of the exclusive things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has for Himself. He has for Himself. He is Mutakabbir. He's the one who's great. So there's certain things we're not allowed to do. So I find that very, personally, I find that very disturbing, actually. Because if you look at these computer-generated worlds, like, they're all, they're not real as well. They have these perfect edges, which in the real world you don't get, Very smooth edges. And then you get these children that are like, I've seen some children, I don't know if it's related to that, but I suspect it is related to that, watching those type of programs. They're getting their toys and they're just scrubbing them, saying they want to make it smooth, want to polish them, Because children are very much more susceptible than adults to what they watch. So we have to be really extra careful with children. And the younger they are, the more susceptible they are, because their brains are developing, Their brains are developing very rapidly. From the time they're born until they get to even 12, 13, 14 is when they start becoming completely, like adult-like brains. So when the brain is developing and growing, it's much, small things can affect it in much bigger ways. It's like the arrow, when you fire an arrow. If you deviate from the point of origin even a little bit, by the time it gets to the end, it will deviate a lot. So it's much more dangerous if things happen early. When you're adults, it's different as well. You're much less susceptible to that type of effect of things. So, we're living in a society where internet has come in, television has come in, all these things have come in very recently, within our generation, So we don't really know what the effect is going to be on the children that are growing up, exposed to all of these things as well. How they're going to turn out. Which we're probably seeing the first ones now coming through. Kids who are like, they're attached to their personal computer as if it's part of them now, They've literally become androids, An android is a human computer, thing, amalgamation of a computer and a human. They really like that, People are telling me, you come across a 14-year-old kid now, you ask them, for example, you talk about anything, they can Google it straight away, while they're still talking to you. They're Googling, giving you information, which you may think is useful. I'm not saying everything is bad, but just, that whole idea that this person is now really an android. He's so attached to that computer, It's almost become like part of him. Anyway, so that's the visual culture. just some things that we need to look into and not just take for granted that we find ourselves in a certain environment and just take for granted that this is normal or this is okay. We need to really think deeply about how it's affecting our children, how it's affecting us, you know. So it says, you know, if you let your gaze just wander everywhere, it's going to, first of all, you know, you're going to be looking at things that you don't need to. This is wasting your time, distracting you. They don't concern you. And secondly, on some occasions, you'll be looking at things which are haram as well for you to look at. You know? And then if you actually do this intentionally, you may even fall into doing a sinful act. فربما تعلق قلبك بذلك. And so you may see something and then it may enter your heart. You know, like I was saying before, it may trigger off thought processes, desires and things like that. فَتَهْلِكْ إِنْ لَمْ يَرْحَمِ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى. And this could lead to your destruction if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have mercy on you. This could lead to your destruction, you know. Seeing these things and then thinking about these things and then igniting desires about these things and then, you know, falling into haram. Because if you see, you know, the majority of time when people fall into haram, of committing major sins, you know, like zina and things like that, it's not something they'll do suddenly. It's something that happens when they spend time with another person. Yeah? It happens gradually and slowly over time. And this is why the whole thing about segregation is, you know, so important. You know, they're not going to just meet someone and straight away they're going to go off and have a relationship. It's going to be someone that you work with. It's going to be someone that you go to college with. Yeah? At first it was very innocent, you know, just talking or doing things which are, you know, maybe discussing schoolwork or work-related issues. Then it just becomes a bit more social. Yeah? That's how it's going to take place. It's going to take, that's the majority of cases. Yeah? So this is where we need to be careful. We have to keep these boundaries, you know, of etiquette, of how Muslims are supposed to be. فلقد روي أن العبد لينظر النظر يغل فيها قلبه كما يغل الأديم في الدباغ. So it has been also narrated that a slave may sometimes look at, just make a look, just have a look, a glance. And from that glance, his heart becomes immersed in that glance. Just as he says, just metaphorically, as a cloth is immersed into dye. Yeah? Just from one look can corrupt your heart. Yeah? One look can corrupt the heart. لا ينتفع بها أبدا. That look is of no benefit to that person in any way. وإن كان مباحا, even if the thing is mubah. For example, you're looking at expensive cars, or you're looking at, you know, people who have a lot of wealth, at the houses they live in. You know, nowadays people have, do window shopping and things like that. You know, they have catalogs at home looking at really expensive things that they can't afford. But, you know, they're looking, so the heart's becoming immersed in things, even though they're mubah. But, you know, it's of no benefit. And it's distracting you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's putting desires in you that's going to be ultimately wasting your time because it's not working for the akhirah. You know? فَرُبَّمَا يَشْتَغِلُ قَلْبُكَ بِهِ. Maybe your heart will then just become preoccupied with those things. You know? فَجَاءَكَ الْوَسْوَاسُ وَالْخَوَاتِرُ بِسَبِيلِ. And because of that, then waswas will start coming to you. Shaitan will start trying to work on that as well. You know, that car, you know, you need to get that car. You know? Your neighbour's got that car. You know, you need to get a better car than your neighbour. Well, khawatir, you know, all these thought processes and things coming into your head. How can I make my first millions, you know? فلعلك لا تصل إليه وتبقى مشغول القلب منقطعا من الخير. This may be things that you won't get, or you may get, or you may not get, or you'll never get to. But you've just been, you know, your heart has just been preoccupied with dreaming or thinking about those things. And it's just really been not really good for you, not really helped you in any way, you know. وَإِن كُنْتَ لَمْ تَرَى ذَلِكَ فَقَدْ كُنْتَ مُسْتَرِيحًا مِنْ ذَلِكَ كُلِّهِ. Imagine you hadn't even bothered looking at those things in the first place. You wouldn't have wasted all that time. You wouldn't have put yourself through that trouble, that anxiety, that hopes, those desires. You know? وفي هذا المعنى ذكر عن عيسى صلوات الله على نبينا وعليه أنه قال إياكم والنظر وإنها تزرع في القلب الشهوة وكفى بها لصاحبها فتنة. So it says in this meaning has been narrated or mentioned that from Isa alayhi salam, that he said, beware of the glance, because surely the glance plants in the heart a desire. And enough is that of a fitna. Enough of that is a tribulation. So we're literally living in that type of, you know, environment where this is just, you know, so prevalent. Advertising. That's what advertising is, taken to a different level of trying to put these desires into us. You know? Taken to a whole different level, isn't it? You know? They spend billions and billions on doing this advertising. Do you think they would be spending those billions if they weren't impacting on people? The only reason why they spend those billions is because they see their sales rise by more billions than the money they put into the advertising. You know? So they're putting desires into us. You know, iPad 2. You know, you've got one, but now you need two. You have to have two, and somehow they have to convince you that you have to have two. You know, they have to somehow convince you that you have to have two. All of this, you know, the consumer culture is just completely taking us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Completely away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وقال ذو النون نعم حاجب الشهوات غض الأبصار. You know, I've just from my own personal experience, I've met some people that don't have these things, you know, of dunyawi things. And they're happy, contented people. You know? I've met them in Syria, you know. And I was so amazed by these people. I said, Alhamdulillah, I'm so glad these people are here. You know, these people, and then some of them are pretty normal people. I'm not talking about great sheikhs or anything like that. Some, you know, they just, you know, relatively poor, especially compared to us. Just poor people in Syria. You know, it's a poor country. They have wage of like probably £50 a month or something like that, you know. But they're happy, contented people. They get their vegetables from the market, which is very cheap. You know, if you buy the vegetables that are in season, they'll buy them like in bulk when it's in season, and they'll cook them for their family. You know, they have big families, and they just cost very little money if it's in season, and then they'll store them. You know, as well, like pickle them or find ways of storing them so you have them throughout the year. You know, so you can. There's ways you can buy food very cheaply if you wanted to. You know what I mean? There are ways. Like when it's season for tomatoes, I remember in Syria, you get thousands of tomatoes and you can buy literally these big bags for like 2 liras. You know? It's like 20p or something. 1 lira, you know, you can buy large amounts of stuff. So then they'll buy those tomatoes at that time. And then they'll take them and they'll make, you know, they'll like preserve them and things like that. So they make jam, pickles, things like that, that you can then keep that, so it's food. So they don't need much money. They don't have those issues of mortgages and rent that we have. Because they just have a simple house which they've probably had in their family for generations. And then what do? They do their work, they earn their money, and in the evenings they'll go to majlis of dhikr, or majlis of mawlid, or majlis of ilm. And these are the things they really enjoy and they love. And you see the enjoyment they get, They come to a majlis of like a hadra, they're singing qasidas, They love to sit with shayukh and get knowledge. They go to the durus of ilm, get knowledge of the Quran, hadith. And that's their life. They're happy people though. You see them, they're smiling, they're happy, they're contented. They don't have anxieties, worries, all of these things. They don't have desires for getting lots of things either. I think I mentioned before once, and this is quite rare now to find these people, and it's becoming more rare as the American and the Western culture penetrates more and more into those societies. It's becoming more rare, but there are still people. And I met two young people that really amazed me. Because most of the young people you find there, their greatest ambition is to try to get to either America or Britain, or if not, then any other European country. And this is including, I'm talking about the religious people out there, the so-called religious youngsters. So people who are in the religious madrasas and things. They have the same, diseases but for example, they'll say, we want to go to America to do da'wah. Why do they need to come to America to do da'wah? Do da'wah in your own country. We've got people in America doing da'wah. So this is like a way that shaitan sort of tricks them as well, So this is because they see a lot of sheikhs from their own countries that have been to America or Britain, and they've done da'wah, and they've got lots of followers, and they've got lots of money as well. So it's like all good, not only you do the thing for the deen, but you've got your dunya at the same time. But to these two particular youngsters I met there, both of them one of them was a student of Sharia, the other one was just a normal person, like an accountant, but he had a love for the deen and he used to attend a lot of the majlis of the ulama in the evenings and things like that. They're the two people they said to me, I said to them, because I made friends with them, and I said to them, why don't you come to England sometime? And both of them said to me, why do you want to come to England? Why would you want to go to England? Leave Sham and go there, to that place. I was like, subhanAllah, I'm so happy to hear this, because I was spending my whole time, all the other people I met, they were like, oh, you're from Britain? Wow, mashallah. And I'll be like, no, brother, not mashallah, astaghfirullah, And so they, they've got that, they've got a certain type of image, obviously, but you can't blame them because the image they have of those countries is through Hollywood films and Hollywood soaps and things like that, some of the sheikhs I studied with, like Sheikh Abdul Wahab, Najib, Sheikh Siraj, who I mentioned in Liverpool, they were of those type of people. You can go and see them if you want to yourself. Sheikh Siraj, he lives opposite the masjid, in Liverpool. This is a masjid, this is his house. All he does 5 times a day, he goes to the masjid, comes home. He's got no television, nothing in his house. His house is full of books, like these books, but full of books. And he spends his time, when he's not in the masjid, and not revising Quran, because he's hafiz of Quran, so he revises 5 juz every day. The rest of the time he will be reading, researching certain masail, writing certain things, fatwas or whatever, teaching people. And that's what his life is. He doesn't have any He's got no desire for the latest iPad or, you know. But these are happy people. That's the key thing. You see, they've got that tranquility and that happiness that running after dunya will never give people. As the Prophet ﷺ said, you know, when the son of Adam has one handful, he wants the next handful, doesn't he? Or he has one pile of gold, he wants the next mountain of gold. And he will never be satisfied except with the dust of his grave. Yeah. And Shaykh Abdul Wahab as well, in Syria, same. You know, he's the Imam of a tiny masjid. The masjid is the size of this room. It's the smallest masjid I've ever seen. And he was actually given, the government there, they wanted to move him to a larger masjid, and he refused. You know? Because he said at the time when they offered me, this ayah of Quran was repeating around in my head. When Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam said, Rabbi as-sijnu ahabbu ilayya. When Sayyidina Yusuf said, "Oh my Lord, the prison is more beloved to me than what they are calling me to." Meaning, you know, obviously Sayyidina Yusuf, the women were calling him to perpetrate, you know, something haram, and he said, "Oh my Lord, prison is more beloved to me than that." Because that was his option. Either you do what they say or you go to prison. So he said that ayah was just going around and around in my mind, so I rejected the offer. You know, so he lives in that souk, in the house. He goes, if you go to his house, you see a very simple house. You know, once again, they don't have the issue of mortgage or anything. These are just their family houses, you know, but very simple house, you know, not much furniture or decoration or anything. Because they don't get paid much. If you're an imam of a masjid, you get paid hardly anything. You get paid peanuts, you know. He goes to the masjid, comes back, prays, you know. But you see the enjoyment he gets from teaching. You know, his particular love is grammar. And when we used to study grammar with him, and you come to some obscure point of grammar, you know, some very obscure, like ikhtilaf, difference between the grammarians of an ayah of Quran, and you're reading that, and you know, you're falling asleep, but he's like saying Subhanallah, you know, like he's going to wajj, like really like amazed, you know. So these are people, you know, they're happy people, they're with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you know, lowering the gaze for our context can also include from all of these advertisements. You know, all of these advertisements. Not just because, obviously, often they use sexual images as well, but not only because of that, but because we want to guard our heart against the hubb al-dunya, putting these desires within us of things that we don't really need. So, you know, we can guard ourselves, lower our gaze from all of these things. Don't waste our time looking at all of these things that are distracting us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is difficult, but it can be done. It can be done if people want to do it. It can be done. You know, you can control your environment. You know, I spent you know, several years of my end of my student life, and the first few years when I was studying also in Syria, I was able to do that very effectively. You know, you can cut off all of those things. Now, obviously, when we're in the workplaces, it can become more difficult. You know, but like I said, then we've got to try our best to find type of environments that are conducive to our iman, not destructive. You know? وقال ذو النون نعم حاجب الشهوات غض الأبصار. ذو النون al-Misri, one of the famous early scholars, said the best gatekeeper or the best guard of the shahawat, of the desires, is lowering the gaze. Is lowering the gaze. you know, if your life, you know, you keep your gaze lower, you're not looking around at things. Do what you need to do, you know, your work that you need to do your work. You know, do your studies, go home. Preoccupy your time with the deen, preoccupy your time with the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, preoccupy your time with learning and those things. You can protect yourself, you know. You can protect your gaze. وقد أحسن القائل وأنت إذا أرسلت طرفك رائدا لقلبك يوما أتبعتك المناظر. He's quoting some poetry. رأيت الذي لا كله أنت قادر عليه ولا عن بعضه أنت صابر فإياك والأمر الذي إن توسعت موارده ضاقت عليك المصادر. Let's ask if any of the brothers have that in English. Anyone got that in English? No? You got the Urdu, have you?
Yeah,
Do you want to read the Urdu
yes.
one? Yeah, some people might understand in Urdu.
अगर तुम अपनी आँख को खुला छोड़ दोगे तो रंगारंग नज़ारे एक रोज तुम्हें मुशक्कत लगा देंगे। दूसरा, तुम वो अशिया देखोगे कि ना तो उन तमाम पर तुमको कुदरत होगी और ना उन पर बात से सब्र हो सकेगा।
One last line, is there another line? No?
The third line is not here.
That was the one that was difficult to translate. I'm not surprised. You don't have third. Is that Arabic or?
Yes, Arabic.
Oh, that's interesting. You don't have a Bangladeshi one for Dr. Jamil? Okay, so you know, basically the meaning is if you let your gaze go travel here and there, you will tire out your heart with all of these things that you're looking at, gazing at. You know, all these images. You will see those things that, you know, you will not be able to attain to all of them. And some of them you will not be able to have patience from. You know, you won't be able to resist the temptation of, in other words. So beware of a matter that has got so many mawarid, so many sources of these images that can come to you if you just let yourself, you know, looking around everywhere you want to. So beware of that, you know, because it will lead to yourself becoming constrained. Because there's so many, you know, images are endless out there. And you can see so how much this applies so much so, more so to our age that we live in. فإذا لما كنت غاض البصر حافظا للعين لا تنظر لما لا يعنيك ولا يهمك كنت تقي الصدر فارغ القلب مستريحا من كثير من الوساوس سالم النفس عن الآفات متزايدا في الخيرات فتنبه لهذه النقطة الجامعة والله الموفق بمنه وفضله. So Imam al-Ghazali says, so if you become someone who is lowering the gaze and taking care of what they're looking at, protecting their eyes, you will not look at things that don't concern you and are not important for you. Then you will become someone who is protecting his heart, you know, and also farig al-qalb, meaning you're not distracting. The heart is not full of all these distractions and images. So once Shaykh Hamza mentioned once, you know, if you see images, they always stay in your mind. You can never get rid of them. And so if you think about all the movies you've ever watched in your whole life, you can still, all those images are still in your head. You know, from when you were young, all those movies, you can still, if you want to, you can bring back all of those images. It's something actually quite phenomenal as well, that the mind has that capacity, almost endless capacity. There's one actually interesting, one of the things I was looking into once, this aspect of memory, that the memory is actually almost endless. And even if you read psychology or neuropsychology textbooks, you'll find they mention that when they talk about long-term memory, they actually use the word infinite, that this is an infinite store. And that's very strange. Whenever you see scientists use the word infinite, then you gotta know there's something strange here, because science cannot deal with infinite, the actual concept of infinite. You know, it's not something that scientists should be saying. You know? It's sort of like a contradiction to their very discipline. You know, how can a finite, if you take a very strict scientific view, how can a finite entity like a brain have an infinite capacity? Doesn't make sense. So I think they say that because empirically that's what they found. You know, that how can you have all these images and everything stored potentially endless throughout your whole life? Everything you've experienced is there in your head. So I personally suspect this is linked to the ruh itself. You know, the ruh, the soul. Because, as Imam al-Ghazali himself says, the ruh is from one aspect in the realm of the infinite. Yeah? One aspect of the ruh is in the realm of the infinite. Allahu Alam. But because for a long time they thought that the brain, that they would find a certain part of the brain which was the memory, where all the memories were stored. You know, because they were using the analogy like a computer. They were thinking of the brain like a computer, so there would be like a hard drive somewhere. We just need to find it, you know. And then if you damage part of that you can actually start erasing certain memories if you knew exactly precisely where they were stored. They thought it would be like that, but now they found it's nothing like that. And the best way they can think of it is that memories are actually distributed throughout the brain. Any particular memory will be distributed throughout the brain, and so that is something really ajib. If you thought about it from a strictly biological point of view. So, not to lose our point here, I mean, you know, any images that we see, they will be with us. They will stick with us, you know, and it will be very hard for us to get rid of them. And there will potentially be things that are distracting us. You know, so the more sort of empty, the more pure our heart is from all of these images, the more it's conducive for us to focus on what we need to focus on. You know? So he says, pay particular heed to this very important point that I've mentioned. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gives tawfiq by His generosity and His bounty. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from looking at those things which are displeasing to Him and those things which are not necessary for us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from looking at those things which are haram for us to look at. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to purify our hearts and to devote ourselves to doing what is pleasing to Him and to striving and struggling in His path with all of those things at our disposal. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad. Jazallahu anna sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. Jazallahu anna sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. Jazallahu anna sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Any questions or anyone wanted to say anything about the